And when I talk to some of these demonstrators, particularly the pro-Trump demonstrators, George, and I think about how Joe Biden might have to try to unify the country, I don't know what would happen to sway these Trump supporters other than President Trump himself conceding. Because when I ask them about this election being stolen, they will tell me outright they don't believe any politician, Republican or Democrat, other than President Trump and his most steadfast supporters. I can also tell you that these allegations of widespread fraud typically do not go past the fact that they think that mail-in ballots that were received after Election Day are going to be counted here, which aren't part of this tally right now. Still, these demonstrators are growing by the minute here. I can tell you the police are very cautious right now. So far, there's a layer of about 10 steps separating these groups. But as tense as it has been across the country, it's playing out right here now on the steps of the Capitol.
Thank you, Chair. I want to take that to Heidi Heitkamp. And Heidi, I guess this goes for both sides. Often the people in the streets don't represent the masses. You see, those are the people who are most engaged, most energized, most extreme. Perhaps talk about that from the perspective of Trump supporters. And again, we were talking about this a little bit before, but how Joe Biden can speak to those who are ready to listen, who are not the most militant, the kind who would run out into the streets.
You know, I think it's interesting. You keep saying how Joe Biden can talk to them. You know, just like Democrats, not all Democrats believe the same stuff. All Trump voters are not born equal. Those are going to be the most radical and, quite honestly, the most dangerous that you see there. People who won't accept anything. But I would challenge Chris Christie a little bit and say, where is the extension of the hand? Typically, we have a concession speech when we get to this point. We're not.
Can be done. What can be done with taxes? Okay, if you're going to focus on any sort of a tax cut, it ought to be for the middle and the lower income people in this country. Are there things that can be done with infrastructure? For sure, but making sure broadband's available to everyone. I think things can happen. Are there going to be fights? But yeah, there's probably going to be fights, but you will have incremental steps. And I've always said that this election in 2020 was not a big vote on ideology. This is sort of getting back to normal. The big debate will come in 2024, but that's a long way off.
Yeah.
Today's the day that Biden's been declared as president.
Well, Governor Kassu, what was it about Joe Biden that made you felt he was the person for this moment?
Well, I've known him a long time, and just a couple of years ago, he and I sat on the stage. He invited me to the University of Delaware, and we had a couple hour time together speaking publicly and spent a lot of time privately. And one of my dear friends was John McCain, who was one of his best friends. And I know what the guy's all about. And he is, when I say a throwback, I don't mean old. I mean a return to the fact that we need to communicate. We need to be patient. We don't need to demonize our opponents, figure out a way to see the best in them. That's what I did throughout my entire career. And I resonate because I'm done. So I think actually he's in a better position today because being pulled from the left isn't going to work. They will not get those things done. And that congresswoman from Virginia warned the Democrats, you want to talk about defunding the police, you'll have no support. And I think this is an opportunity for Biden to talk about the center right and the center left of this country and what can be achieved. Because we have enormous problems with debt, Social Security, Medicare, healthcare, little steps.
This campaign was unlike, obviously, any we have seen before. The turnout was unlike any we have seen before as well. When did you worry that, the decisions that the Biden-Harris ticket made to keep him somewhat, to keep him off the trail, to not have large crowds gathering, to not be knocking on doors for months as the other campaign was doing. Do you worry that might make it impossible for him to get elected?
Well, I felt that age was a factor, and I know there are some people who voted for Donald Trump because they were worried about Biden's age. But what I was more concerned about, Anderson, was the fact that they did not come out early and talk about the violence in the cities. They waited too long on that. They did not, in clear terms, really clear terms, the defunding of the police, and very clearly say, "Are you kidding me? I'm an American. I don't favor socialism." If there'd have been more strength in that, I think that perhaps he would have done better. But look, he's won, and it makes all the difference in the world when they put a W behind you. But he's probably learned from this. One other thing, one Democrat told me at some point, if they'd have been more clear in rejecting the hard left, they would have appealed more to Americans who I believe essentially live in the middle. That's where Americans are. And by the way, you can't take care of one group over another. If you're going to cut taxes for those at the top, you've got to make sure that those who are the hardworking people in the middle and the bottom, that they get relief. It has to be a balanced program where everybody feels as though they can be included, Anderson. That is what success is in politics. And forget the popularity and all the what party you belong to. Do what makes sense.
Governor Kasich, appreciate your time. Ben, I heard you.
Thanks for letting me be on with Anderson.
I appreciate it, as always. I heard you sort of agreeing with the governor when talking about reaching out to Republicans or listening to Republicans. I've spent the past 4 years, trying to find some kind of common ground. And there's sometimes it's going to be battleground issues. You're talking about, immigrant rights and religious freedom for Muslims. Those are battleground issues, and we can't give an inch on that. But there's been some common ground issues, whether you're talking about addiction and the opioid crisis, whether you're talking about opportunity zones, anti-poverty, whether you're talking about criminal justice, where I thought there was more room for us to work together than people were recognizing. I think that the grace that frankly had not been shown the past 4 years, we need to start showing right now. We know what it feels like to feel like the president's not on your side and to want the president to send you some signals. There's a danger that we might start saying, well, don't say those to those guys, they were mean to us. I don't want us to become what we're fighting. I don't want us to feed what we're fighting. I believe that Joe Biden is correct. If we reset this conversation, there is common ground. But you got people you got a bunch of older, white, heterosexual guys who are some of the best people in the country. They know a trade. They raised a family. They started a business. We need those guys to help rebuild this country. And they need to know that we respect them. They voted against us, that's fine. Vote against us again. But we need you. We need you to help us rebuild this country. You got kids in this country who need your example. If we start talking that way, I think we can get past some of these fears. And if we don't, we're going to be in another loop, and another loop, and another loop. I'm just wondering, Gloria, when you see these pictures,
I think it's remarkable. I think that, again, it's like the steam has gone out of the teapot, and those people are relieved. I think the challenges are obvious. We've all been talking about the challenges. But one thing is that they believe that Joe Biden can change things, can change the way they feel and the way life is. And another thing I want to say, given all we've been talking about, will he be able to work with the Republicans? Will he be able to work with the liberals? The difference with Joe Biden is that when he tells you something, he's telling you the truth. And I know, Rick, that you know Biden. And he can talk a lot and get on people's nerves and all the rest of it. You can talk about that. But he's a man who's devoted his life to public service. And he is a man who is known as somebody who told you the truth when he was dealing with you. And that matters.
Well, he calls himself a transitional president.
Right.
And the question is, will it be a transition from an era of compromise and good faith compromise, or will it be a transition from that era to an era of zero-sum politics? I totally embrace what you said, Van, but what we have seen is a penchant to weaponize our differences rather than search for common ground. And the political rewards have been there in the parties for that. You can't in a democracy ever get 100% of what you want. And the question is, are you willing to take 80? Or are you not going to take 80? And are you going to make the differences, exploit the differences for your own political profit? Or are you going to come together? And we'll see. That's certainly Biden believes that in the first.
It's also so, we've just come through a campaign where on the Democratic side, you did not see large gatherings of people.
Right.
Obviously, during the protests this summer, there were large gatherings of people in the streets, but to see these crowds this morning, the diversity of the crowds, a lot of mask wearing, which is certainly a good thing. Obviously, not social distancing, and over the last several days, there hasn't been, because we've had this election, but it bears repeating, if we are in the